have so many people, even today, coming to advise me on this and that, why don't you do this? And probably you see a lot of people who say, why don't you follow Finland? You know, Finland is so successful. I was recently in Ireland. Why don't you adopt the Irish model? Singaporean. But then when we go and when people see what Finland is doing now, it is the last things you should adopt. Because as Chris pointed out, and also so many experts say, you be more likely to make what we would call a historical error of judgment. So because education reform doesn't produce the results straight away, it would take 5 years, 10 years. In fact, we look at Stanford data from Professor Hanushek, it would take roughly about 35 years for any reform to show some sort of real results. That is the kind of, there are 3 categories. The longest is 35 years, like Singapore. The medium term is about 20 years. And then you have 10 years as a minimum. For instance, let me give examples of the Finns. People come and say, why don't you let streets come to school with no uniform, you know, they can learn from the trees, they can sit at home half the time, and there's no examination, there's no Ofsted, you know, have less control. Very nice, but you try to implement in this country, it will be disastrous. Because if you ask what the Finn did 20 years ago, this is a question you should ask. What they did 15 years ago, 20 years ago, that has led to today. They were the system was quite controlled. Textbook controls, lots of examinations, lot of scrutiny, lots of the things that, you know, a lot of countries are still doing. Singaporean as well. You know, and when I talk to some friends, say, Finland, and they admit, they said the first thing they do is to tackle inequality first, before tackling the equality issue. They want every school to be equal. That parents do not have to worry. They can live anywhere and they can access to good schools anywhere as well. Now let me show you some situation in Thailand. Next slide. Now before I do that, and I came to the post, I have to have some guiding principles because everybody says do this, do that. I was lucky, I was listening to Mr. Kuroda, who was still is, I think, the governor of the Central Bank of Japan, who came to deliver a Amartya Sen lecture in Bangkok, how to sustain economic growth. And I never forget the 3 things that he mentioned. And I think it's so memorable, and they become the guiding principle. He said, you want the country to prosper, and he presented data. Number 1, you have to invest in human capital. It's obvious. But then he said it's not vague idea of number of hours and schools. They're talking about human capitals in terms of marketable skills, identifiable skills, including soft skills like emotional intelligence and so on. Number 2, it has to be operated in a market-friendly environment. That means central control doesn't work. You're the kind of big brother, big ministry. Unfortunately, my ministry now is the biggest, probably in the world. There are about 30,000 civil servants busy planning education. Now, if you don't think this number is big, let me tell you this. In China, the population is 1.4 billion. There are about 1,000 civil servants in the ministry. So it works out that 1 civil servant per 1 million population. In Thailand, 66 million for 30-odd thousands civil servants. So we work out, we have about 1 per 2,000. Isn't that wonderful? Better than the ratio of doctors per population. But how come our condition is like this. Because the middle layer is so thick and so thick in both literal, no, I'm not going to say that. You know what I mean. Now, the market-friendly environment. We have to liberalize, for instance, we now welcome foreign institutions like Carnegie Mellon has its presence here now. Thanks to the new law that we have asked the Prime Minister to issue the Section 44. And yesterday the Cabinet approved National Taiwan University to come and open its branch here. And we welcome, we can't do it alone. I think it's not possible. Even the teachers' training, I abolished central planning. In the past, the ministry used to plan for teachers' training. And I look at the programs, we end up having the same trainers, the same hotels, the same trainees, the same foods, everything, the same. And only a limited number of people can attend, who you know. But now we use the school voucher system, not the training teachers voucher system. So every single teacher is qualified to have 10,000 baht worth of training in a fiscal year. And for the first time, I never believed myself when we announced the program last year, 320,000, and this year 300,000 teachers signed up to the website for training. And they are allocated training, and I welcome agencies, private universities, all kinds of agencies come and offer their courses. Of course, they have to be meet the standards. But in the past, just for comparison, the website for teachers training, you were lucky if you would have one hit a day. Nobody's bothered to look at it. But then last year when we started this program, certain days we have about 28 million hits. Because people look after themselves. You know, the teachers look after themselves. So they sign up for the courses. You know, a number of things I try to do to reduce the power of the central planning. And you have to have a strong financial system. That means the cash, the budget, and so on. So next slide, please. Then I'm also taught by, you know, when the UK tried to reform its public sectors, health and education, starting from Margaret Thatcher's time, I looked at Lord Sainsbury's report, and he was talking about the recipe for failure. He said there are too many directives, no direction. In any reforms, particularly, if people come and say, why don't you do this, and why don't you do that, if you have no direction, you're doomed to fail. And no goals either. You know, I was talking to the Minister of Education of Ireland last week, and he came with this almost permanent secretary. Also, permanent secretary in Thailand is a bit of a joke. Not a joke in the sense of the position. The name is permanent secretary, but it is the most impermanent job because it can be removed any time. That's the danger. There's nobody who is actually providing the bedrock of a solid sort of foundation of running the system, because it's up to the politician. Now, so then he said something quite interesting in debate with the permanent secretary in front of me. He said the civil service, when you have problems with reform, they're always interested in more inputs. So we lack teachers, we should do this program, we should do that program. But we should have a clear goal. For instance, what is the goal that we want to achieve in concrete terms? Yesterday I called a meeting for STEM education reform, same thing. So it's a lot of big words, but you know, in Thailand now, you know the big word, Thailand 4.0. Everything is 4.0, 4.0. The other day I passed a condominium adverts. Condominium 4.0, starting from 4 million baht. You know, everything is 4.0. So the point is, becomes very banal. It's becomes, it has no meaning when the word is used too much. And also with no meaningful the connection with what you can experience. What does 4.0 mean? So we must have direction and go. But otherwise we get sort of bogged down with too many directives. And the last guiding principles about reform is from the next slide. I love this guy, Edmund Burke. You know Edmund Burke. If you're Irish, if you're UK, statements 250 years ago, he was talking about reforms. And he was in the UK Parliament. And I met Jesse Norman, who wrote a very refreshing biography of Edmund Burke. And Jesse Norman actually teased out and distilled the 7 key characteristics of effective reforms. Number 1, reforms cannot be created. So now you have seen a lot of roadmaps and blueprints of reforms, in fact enacted by the Parliament. Plenty of things to be done. They usually talk about desirable things in abstract terms. And people think, even the Independent Commission of Education Reform at the moment is actually trying to change structures, inventing, created the outcomes that they think they can achieve. But reform has to start from existing arrangements. You work with what you've got. The last education reform in year 2000 still leave us with a lot of problems nowadays. When you try to do major surgery on the system. And we have to look at previous reforms. Have we had reforms? You come to the conclusion in the next slide. Reform has to be has to be proportionate to the problem, has to be measured, even 250 years ago. So when people don't talk about outcomes, just talk about input, we should do this, we should improve our English, we should do that, then can you measure the change? Without having this factored into your reform, it's not going to be successful. It has to be consensual, it has to be calm. This is in the context because Edmund Burke really hated the French Revolution because revolution doesn't work for him. It has to be built on what was already there. It has to be calm, peaceful, and has to be practical, concrete, rather than abstract. Next is. Now I'll show you the real evidence of what is going on in Thailand. Thailand, luckily, I was on headlines today as well, somebody sent me, that the minister threatens to pull out from PISA. Okay? And I'll tell you why. PISA, whether it's good or not, in fact, I think it's a very good system. It's like a thermometer to measure the temperature of education. If you take it now, as what I'm going to describe, the average score of PISA, which stands for Program for International Student Assessment, for OECD country, the developed country is about 500. Thailand has performed consistently since the start of PISA. Thailand is a good boy, he's a good child, basically. He joined everything from start. And we found that we have been very consistent, 421. 420. Every 30 point of difference can be translated to as a year gap of education. So we are nearly 3 years behind OECD in rough terms. Okay? The top of the world usually is Singapore, Finland, particularly Singapore. They get about 550 as score. Okay? So we are about 5 years difference, roughly speaking. It's not here to debate academically, but about 5 years difference. So next slide. But we have heard that there are a lot of capable students in Thailand. Yes, there are. We have won a lot of Olympiads, in maths and science and so on. Yes. So I asked our people to analyze data to show that the top lines, the top performers of PISA the top 10 centile. And again, since year 2000, since the start of PISA, they get around 550. In fact, they are, they rank about number 2 in the world. When we have the top school of PISA in Thailand, the top school of the world, I'll show you the data. But the lowest performers, or the lowest 10 centile, again consistently is 350. So in our country alone, we are 7 years difference between ourselves, between the top and the lowest one. And this slide shows you so many things. It shows, number one, since year 2000, which is luckily, inadvertently, is the beginning of the Education Reform Act. So whatever we have done, given 15 years now has passed, we haven't improved. So whatever we have done, it has changed things. Number two, the main problem in Thailand is inequality. So leave those alone who are on the top. They're already doing well. So what you need to do is actually in Thailand to concentrate on what is the real issue, which is inequality. Now, again, it shows that Thailand is capable of organizing good education. It's really good. It can, because it has shown consistently that there are good people. And these people are to your advantage, to our advantage when you come. And they're competitive. Now, next slide. This is a breakdown of the last, categories of school that the OECD used to analyze. You have the top performing schools, which is the science schools, which again score, the average of that group scores number 1, number 2 in the world, 550. And then you have the university school in Thailand called Satit, that means demonstrative schools. They're linked to university departments or faculty education. They score average around OECD. And then you have the public urban, which are the big schools in town. And then you have the private schools. And you have the public rural, which are very, very small schools with very, very limited resources. For instance, if you talk about science, there will be one science teacher who will teach physics, chemistry, biology, mathematics from year 4 to year 9, 1. When the teacher is ill, then the PE teacher comes instead to teach. That's actually what is happening. And then you have the local authorities school, so decentralized, and in fact, again, heavily controlled by the local authorities. They do not perform well. Then you have the Bangkok Metropolitan, which is not the schools in Bangkok, but the schools are in Bangkok, but then controlled and owned by Bangkok Metropolitan, usually attended by the poorest of the poor. So to be poor in the cities, in the capital, is the worst, because then you can see the outcome. And the last things, that's why the vocational education is really in need of big reforms. The 15 years, because PISA tests 15 years old students, the vocational schools perform the poorest in terms of science. So at best they can be laborers, because they have a weak foundation of science and maths. The next slide. I'll just very quickly show you. These are the science schools. There are 12 science schools in Thailand, and they're all participating. The top one is Mahidol Vidyanuson, 607, which is the top of the world, even has beaten the average of Singapore for over a year gap, 47 points. And then you have, they already started with the OECD average. So these are the top schools. By the way, we have now selected and have worked with the Japanese government. We're going to send those top students to study in what we would call the Kosen system, which is the preparation for future technologists. From next year's onward, we would have about 80 students per year to go and study in Japan for 6 years, 7 years. They will be the population that will come back and be future leaders. So next. Interesting, the university schools. The name doesn't matter much, even though you have the universities. If you link to certain universities, you're not performing well. You see the gap between them is the same as the gap in Thailand. Now you have the top like Sathit Jula, okay, Sathit Jula, Sathit Tumwan. They're already at the top of the world, and then you have certain universities linked to schools which are not doing well at all. Next. This is also very interesting. This is public urban schools. You see the outliers on your right, and the top one is 600. This is Teerakiat Siksa, the top secondary schools in Thailand. Again, they have demonstrated that they can do the best in the world. And then, but usually they kind of around between 400 and 450. They are kind of the average of the Thais, representing the Thais. Because remember, the score of Thailand is 421. Next. This is the public rural. You know, a few of the 500, but the rest are sort of gathered around 400 marks. Next. This is the private schools. Again, you have the top private schools, Bangkok Christian, Saint Kabir, and all this. Again, outliers. The rest are not doing well. That's why we need to help private schools. Next. Local authority schools, there are one or two odd ones out. The rest are even performing lower than those of the poor rural area schools. Next, Bangkok Metropolitan. Are they any outstanding schools? And they are one among the lowest. Next. This is vocational kids. When you test it in science, they're the worst. Next. This is the index, so I asked to see the index of shortage. You know, as you now can see, the university schools, interesting, they're private schools. They're not short materials. You know, in terms of education material, textbooks, IT equipment, library, laboratory, physical infrastructure, if you read building grounds, heating and cooling system, you will see they actually factors everything into the index. But pretty poor in the rural, in the government sector. Even Bangkok Metropolitan, basically this message, one message stands out very clearly that it's very easy to put in infrastructures, buying equipment, but it's not so easy to change things, because after all, the business of education is not material. It's the relationship between the teachers and the students. So next is again, the same picture, the shortage of educational staff, both in quantities and in quality. And when you reverse it to see the resources. Okay, next. Yeah, university schools and science schools, for instance, the students at Hyatt, which performs top of the world, have 13 PhD students in that school. PhD teachers with PhD. And they have access to the electron microscope. They have everything, because they're sitting next door to Mahidol University. And they're under, also is a separate autonomous entity. You know, the government support per head per student is about 200,000 baht per year, and they're residential. The Julapon school, which is another category of school, the support per capita, that means per head of students, is about 80,000. Normal, ordinary schools, 3,000 baht. So, I mean, let alone the input of the students' demographics, which are already have passed through the competitive exams. So basically, they're quite selective students. So the best get better support. The poor get poorer support. That is what is going on. Now, next, I'll show you two or three more slides. Can you put everything up here? This is a very interesting slide. It's actually analyzed by OECD. It's called Poverty is Not Destiny. The reason is because of the red rectangles that represent 4 countries have, in a way, falsified that poverty is destiny. in all countries, but for these four, poverty is not destiny. High correlation between this index, which is called economic, social, cultural status. Basically, it measures, the household income, the household interest, the cultural factor as well. Parents talk about education or not, the number of books in the house, and so on. Basically, if you think the proxy of economic status, in most countries, but for these four, if you're poor, if you come from the red rectangle stand for the lowest 10 centile of this index, and the green triangle stand for the top 10 centile. So every country is the same. But these four countries, Macau, Hong Kong, Vietnam, and Estonia, their kids from the lowest rung of the society already perform at the average of OECD. And their kids have already beaten 20 or more countries in OECD. Beaten the richest of the OECD countries. So OECD is asking, what is going on in this country? When they look at the next slide, I think they're quite amazed. The next slide. Next slide is called resilient, percentage of resilient students. By that I mean, those who come from the bottom 25% of this index, that means the poorest, those who come from the poorest 25%. Because now they compare like with like. You often say, oh, Vietnam is doing well because of this, because of that, but they compare like with like. So how many out of 100 who come from the lowest 25% but perform, score the highest, among the highest of the 25%? So how many of them in 100? They find it Vietnam, 77, followed by Macau, Hong Kong, Singapore, Japan, Estonia, China, Finland, Korea, Spain. It's almost like a World Cup league now. But Vietnam, 77 out of 100. Thailand, wonderful, 17. So if you go to rural areas, you ask the kids, why you come to school? I don't know. What do you want to be in the future? I don't know. Why are you here? I don't know. But this slide reflects, according to OECD and our studies that we discussed with them, reflect two things. One is students' motivation, which is a neglected area of reform in so many reform countries. We often talk about structural reforms, teaching and learning, this and that. But we haven't paid much interest in, how can we motivate kids who are already demoralized, disaffected, to want to study. If you go to Vietnam, students want to study all the time. One time I asked a very stupid question to an industrialist, a very famous one, I wouldn't reveal name. I said, sir, do you think Vietnam will outperform Thailand economically or not? He looked at me thinking as if I'm asking is kind of very simple, but also, kind of stupid question. He said, look, T, a country with 90 million population who work very hard is going to produce more than a country of 60 million who are a bit lazy. It's the fact. There are 90 million who are working damn hard. It's going to produce more. So one day they will catch us up. Definitely, they will, if we do not change. Particularly if every kid of 15 years old, according to the figure, if you have 100 students, 77% of them are hardworking. Whereas Thailand, 77. You're looking at your country now, I can show you. Canada is not doing too bad. The UK is not doing too bad. But you look at the country, Peru, where's Croatia? Because I'm trying to see how come they beat Argentina yesterday. You look at that. Now, next slide. The OECD said number one is the motivations of students, which they admit they haven't worked. Many countries haven't worked very hard on this. The other thing is that consistently, that the common factor that has proved very powerful in the education reform policy, and basically Andre Schleicher told me, he's the head of OECD BCCT. He said, if you can do one thing, you make a system so that the system allows the best teachers to teach the worst students, then that is the most important education reform strategy. He said China did this, Vietnam did this, but in Thailand it's so rigid. The union is so strong. I was telling Chris a lot, but I won't tell you because otherwise I get into trouble. Last year also, but I'll do it privately. So don't ask me. Now, this is very, because it's borne out by research after research. Can you press one more time? Because these are the references from Gate Foundation, from John Hattie, from Nanu Check. The difference between a very effective teacher and a poorly performing teacher is huge and consistent. The top 10 centile teachers teach the content of worth of 1.5 years. Whereas the bottom 10 centile, if you're lucky, can teach only 0.5. Okay? Furthermore, it matters more for disadvantaged students. Over a school year, for disadvantaged pupils, the difference between a good teacher and a bad teacher, in fact I shouldn't say bad, a good and bad, is a whole years of learning. You can see how significant it is. If you factor into the numbers of teachers, we have 400,000 teachers in Thailand. And so, how can we make the system less rigid? Nowadays, it's very hard to move anybody. And next is, before I go to do this, I just want to tell you that all this have to be the system. People underestimate the power of the rule of law. At the moment now, I'm known, for better or for worse, as a minister who has cracked down on corruption. And now people come to say to me, don't crack down on corruption. Just concentrate on good things you can do. But they try to distract me. The reason is very simple. All the reforms would not work if there is rampant corruption, no rules of laws. I'm talking even transparency in terms of appointment of head teachers, appointment of head of districts, all kinds. Even the school lunch, there are thefts, there are thieves in the guise of head teachers who steal. You look at the scandals. All sorts of scandals are now happening in the Ministry of Thailand. Not because it's happening in this age, in this administration. It has happened for a long time, but we are very determined to clean this up. And we need to do. One time I met a very highly revered monk, not long ago, in fact, about 3 months ago. He said to me, Minister, you see, you may have good vision. You have to work very hard. But remember, if you are in a boat with so many holes, the good vision would not help you. The boat will sink. He said the holes are corruptions. You have to do something to clean this up. Now, before I end, I just want to tell you some of the good policies that we do. Now, when I say the good things that we do, you probably wouldn't imagine how come it's not done before. In the last 17 years since the year 2000 of education reform, I have been jokingly said on many occasions, there have been no policies at all. I said, why? Because there have been 21 ministers. I'm the 21st. The average lifespan of any minister is about 11 months. In some years we have 4 ministers. Now, To be a minister in Thailand, I realized, although I'm not used to it now, still, it's a big deal. Some politicians just come in, have absolutely no ideas, no good ideas. They have a lot of ideas about how to pitch money. They have a lot of ideas. And they do, they have a lot of projects, so no policy. Some good ones, which are rare. They may have some ideas, but by the time they learn about the system, they learn how to work with the system, they're already gone. Time's up. There has been, if I may say, no policy. And no preparation, nothing. They just listen to the civil servants. They both together work on some projects, and that's what's been happening. For instance, the first one is the English language teachers training boot camp. When Mong Riyadai and I came in with Mike Selby, my former advisor, we found that there is a budget of English training for English language or upgrading English, but the budget is scattered, piecemeal, and to no benefits of the teachers. So for the first time, we worked with British Council. It's the biggest project historically for British Council in the world, and also in Thailand. To have a solid long-term training in 18 regional centers, a year worth of the trainers staying in the centers, and intensive training, and then with follow-ups and so on. I would, I have no time to elaborate more on this. Number two, the English language online assessment platform, which we are now doing again. This will be the first of its kind where we can assess speaking and writing. We will assess 4 skills, but speaking and writing will be assessed with artificial intelligence. We can't rely, because if we want to do it en masse, that means everybody. We have to find ways to do it. I know that IELTS and TOEFL are doing this, but we are going to do it on massive scales. I know China is doing with a certain province, but Thailand is going to do it countrywide. And the head of British Council is coming to see me. I've seen him, we've met each other many times, but we're going to leave this as a kind of a legacy for the ministry, that we can assess everybody. Listening and reading are easy, because you can do it online very easy. And number 3 is the partnership with Cambridge assessment in revising STEM curriculum. They have done this, and then the BISA platform. We get them to prepare the BISA-like bank system, also the training of writing, and also the, you cannot train just 15 years old. You have to work backward as well. In order to be able to answer BISA-like or BISA-style questions, you have to prepare them from when they're very young. Otherwise, it's just first aid. But the first aid is also important, because we have discovered that the translation of the exam items is not good. They are right translations, but the syntax, the reading, poses so much difficulty for our students. It's almost like good Google translation. Correct, but when the Thais read, and they have been denying me access. They said it's confidential. I said, I respect that confidentiality. I have no problems with that. I just want to see your translation. I still keep it confidential. I won't let our students know. You have to honor me this, but at the same time, if you won't let me see, because visa is going to take place in August, if you don't let me see the translation, I'm not going to let our kids sit exams, because it's an issue, a big issue of Thailand. And we have to protect our country, not to serve some ideas of some crazy rigid confidentiality of OECD. So that's why when I announced yesterday, it became headlines today, that minister threatens to quit visa. Yes, I do, if they don't let me do it, if they don't let me see. And we have joint degrees at the university level, the new law allowing, this is just section 44 with all the benefits. This is very interesting. Let me conclude by telling you this, because it leads to how we can work here. leading UK schools and now present here. When I was first appointed minister, I had a lot of ideas. I want to do this. The officials say, no, minister, you cannot do that. And you want to do this? No, sir, you cannot. Why not? No rules. Can you do this? No, you cannot, because no regulations. So I said, apart from breathing and going to the toilet, what can I do? Without a law, of course. Then I realized, starting to study the system of the legal structure. And now, most of you have legal some backgrounds in law, you will know that there are countries with common law system. And there are countries with civil law system. And Thailand is governed by civil law system. So when I noticed, I then wanted to study a bit more law. So I went to Thammasat University. I said, I want to enroll in public administration law, public law. Then the president of Thammasat University said, Minister, you don't have to. I said, why not? Just remember two things. Whatever is not permitted, you cannot do. Okay? If you want to do things, you have to have laws and rules. Then I realized that you cannot use common sense here. Which in a way is good, because the problem with Thailand is not the lack of laws, it's the lack of law enforcement. And if you leave it to common sense, the country would have become worse. And I study history. King Rama V knew then when he decided to adopt civil law system instead of common laws. So, friends, when you were here, when you were struggling with the Thai bureaucrats, don't blame them. It's the fundamental system that people don't think about. So, because how come you're so rigid? Because there's no law written. You know, in order to start a university, even to start a ministry, you see debates now. We want a ministry, a new ministry of higher education. Still, we cannot agree. But after Brexit, what happened? The UK immediately had two ministries straight away. Executive orders, fine, done. But here you cannot. Okay. So, and I realized, and I look at Carnegie Mellon, for instance. Carnegie Mellon has been wanting to come to Thailand for a long time. In the last 3 years, they tried very hard. For instance, I tell you, they say they want to study the department. They want to start a department ECE, Electrical Computer Engineering. Then the Higher Education Commission say, no. There is no standard for ECE. We know EE, Electrical Engineering. We know CE, Computer Engineering. But we don't have such a thing called ECE. Therefore, we have to appoint a committee to scrutinize and then have a new regulation. So they got frustrated. So they came back. They said they submitted that their course is 150 credits. Then the Thai Higher Education Commission says, no. Our engineering course is at least 180. So yours is not up to our standards. Really? So they got fed up. I met them in May. So then after knowing all this, I went to the Prime Minister and said, PM, you must do something. They want to come, issue a new law. And at that time, the Prime Minister still had the power. So he issued Section 44, which essentially consists of only 2 items. Number 1, those who want to come will be exempted from Higher Education Commission standards. That's it. Number 2, those who want to come will be exempted from regulations by the private university laws. Because if you're foreigners, you cannot have a university unless you have this amount of shares, percentage of shares. Like I was talking to our friend from Australia, who's basically you have to follow these rules of land. Otherwise, foreigners cannot buy land. There's all kinds of things. So you'll be exempted. But number 3, which is actually the benefit, they will benefit from Board of Investment, BOI, all the privileges as well. So they came, and they're going to have the first master and PhD course in this September. Then in the end, I asked him, you tell me why you come. He said they're so surprised, taken aback, astounded, if you like, that Thailand has to enact a law to welcome them. I think simply because they come from a different legal system. You know, I'm not arguing that common law is better. To me now, I think common law for Thailand is probably will be less effective than civil law system. I think we are doing well. The problem for us is even civil law system allows common sense if you talk to the legal experts. But the problem is we I don't want to say we are so crazy. Something's wrong in the mindset. And also the understanding of fundamental rule of law that is so important in the country, for the country, and in any reform systems, and the understanding. And we're still driven by beliefs, opinions, backgrounds, rather than evidence, and what is the right thing to do. So I'll end my talk now and listen to your either comments or questions. Okay. Finish. Done.
Over to you. If you put your hand up if you've got a question.
Over there.
Over there.
Good.
Oh, 2, 3. Are there microphones? Yes, there's one microphone coming that way.
Hello. Hello, I'm Dr. Claudia Schmidt from Bangkok University. Thank you very much for your very nice speech. I'm almost always amazed when I hear politicians speaking here in Bangkok. I must really give you credit for this very nice speech. I had another speech with MIT in September with one of your colleagues from the Ministry of Digitalization. Also awesome speech. Thank you very much. 2 questions I have. First of all, is Thailand opening up for foreign investments in terms of universities? Are coming more foreigners here to open up universities here in Thailand?
Yes.
Like we have in Vietnam already?
Yes.
Second question, I see a trend now changing direction online teaching. So even here from university, Bangkok University, are considering to open up more and more to online teaching. I don't know if that is really useful, especially for younger Thai students.